Hey guys, NJ here and welcome back to this part 2 video having a look at the Eachine Lizard 95, which is this guy here. Now you'll know that I have dabbled with a few different micros. I did a review on this guy and the QX90 in some depth and showed you how capable they were as micro acro flying quadcopters. Of course these ones when they were released were kind of during that big whoop phase, or when the whoop kind of blew up and these brushed motors were doing a pretty decent job. But all the kind of lackluster side of having to run with micros, like you know, when you run with brush motors, you have motor fade, you have the carbon brushes start to wear on these, and yeah, there's lots of downsides unfortunately to running these micro motors. So it really was a matter of time before the brushless motors became a thing at this size, and I've got to say it really has just filled in all the gaps that I was hoping would be filled in later iterations of quadcopters down in this 95 size territory, or you know, however you want to think about it, the kind of 2-inch category of prop size. So you can see that next to the QX95. It really is remarkable. I mean, look at it next to my hands. I haven't got incredibly big hands, but you can see this thing is tiny, and words can't describe that. Until you've got one of these in your hands, you really can't get a real perception of just how small this thing is and how tiny these motors are. But moving on to having a look at this, there is a lot to like about this. Now, Eachine, you know, they're kind of known for filling in the gaps in the budget side of things at the lower end of the market, although things have definitely made steps towards improvement when we go to the Wizard, for instance, and some of their earlier models before that. So they've never really been taken with kind of all seriousness when it comes to their various models. You know, I've got to say, I really think they've smashed it out of the park with this one. And I should say, I know some people have had problems with theirs. It's the same with anything that's produced on this scale. The occasional one will have problems. But on the vast majority of people I've spoken to and have experiences with these quadcopters have had you know, a really good time. So it's not just I've been lucky. I certainly don't get any of my stuff cherry picked, I'll tell you that now, and I'm sure anyone who reviews stuff for companies like Banggood that supply these will tell you I've had plenty of products of various different manufacturers' makes. I've had various things that I've had to send back because of a defect or something's been wrong with it. So in no way has this stuff been cherry picked for me to mess with. This is the one I got, and I'm sure it was taken straight off the shelf, as you know, and followed all the same QC that everyone else's has. So let's get on to talking a little bit about the quadcopter itself, and starting off with some of the things that I think they've really got right. For a start, I will say that the kind of the big letdown for me on most quadcopters this size is normally the camera. Now, I'm not sure what that board is. It does look like a kind of custom board compared to the normal shape that we see down at this side, so I'm not sure exactly what camera they've used here. It does have a large FOV, very similar to a lot of the micros of this size. So if you're like me and you're used to flying with a nice wide angle lens like a 2.1, which is, you know, I'm mostly freestyle, that lens works really well for me. This will feel like familiar territory. The quality and the sharpness is pretty decent. It's not on the same level as an HS1177 or similar. You know, you can't expect that quality. The bit that matters to me most when you're dealing with cameras that are normally a CMOS type at this level, this size should I say, is the wide dynamic range and the ability to handle high contrasts. So when you've got a lit sky, you know, usually around sunset, and then you've got the ground and you're facing both, and it will usually want to pick one of those two things to expose, dramatically underexposing the ground or exposing the ground and blowing out the sky. You normally get one or the other with these little CMOS cameras, which make them really unflyable in certain conditions. Now, I'll put some flight footage in at the end of this, and you know, stick around to watch that, because it's really I think it's quite incredible for something this size to fly this well. But it really does show, it's at sunset, it really does show that even though it does have some of those telltales of a CMOS, its ability to kind of expose both the light and the dark evenly, and to give you a really nice picture that's much closer to something that we're used to flying on the larger quads. I think it's done a great job, and it's definitely noticeable that that's been an aspect of this micro that they've really thought about trying to improve, and it's great to see development in that area. That can be such a letdown when everything else flies so great, but then the camera's rubbish. It's like, ugh, so close. But yeah, I will say that is one of the best micro CMOS cameras that I've personally used on one of these kind of RTF style quadcopters. It does have one of these circular polarized antennas. Now I know there's an argument just to go with the standard whip antenna, but you know, given the choice, I would rather have a circular polarized antenna. It's just better when it comes to flying around trees and objects and what have you. And the speeds this thing generates and how quickly it gets away from you, I'll take everything it can offer, and for me personally, that's a worthwhile thing to have. And this little bit of protection, the little carbon shroud, the tolerances are a little tight. You know, it can brush against the antenna itself, which is not ideal, but it does its job. It does protect that, which is great. You've also got this option to loosen and adjust the camera angle, which is great. Again, on these micros, not normally something that's particularly easy to do unless, you know, like on the QX95, you have to do it by wedging stuff under it to get it at the angle you want, and it's still kind of exposed up the front here. On this one, it's got a proper, you know, it's well guarded at the front, and you can get it, you know, probably 45 degrees, maybe slightly over that. I've got it at 40 degrees, and it is absolutely perfect running at that angle. And the vertical field of view on this little camera is great as well, so it's totally flyable at the slower speeds where the quad is going to be sitting a little bit flatter. The antenna does come kind of loose for the main. I've got an FR Sky module in here as the option when I got it. And yeah, I just use a rip tie, and the actual standoff here is kind of hexagonal, which is great because the flat part bucks up nicely to the flat part of the zip tie, so this won't rotate round or slip, which is brilliant. So that and a bit of heat shrink, and we've got the antenna up and out the way there. There's a proper buzzer on here, proper 5-volt buzzer, and it is nice and loud. That's a great addition. Really, you've got to have a buzzer on something this small, no question at all. So that's definitely a welcome thing. The LED board on the back is nice and bright. Everything just plugs. It's all plug and play. But yeah, it's tiny. It's good to have those visual options, and of course, with this running base flight, you've got all those programming options that you can, you know, mess around with those to your heart's content. You know, the Larson scanner, all kinds of patterns look very cool on that, and you can set them for different arm states, for turning left, right, like indicators. You can go nuts with that kind of stuff. The camera itself, there is one little kind of niggle with this. Now, it plugs into the side of this board down here to power it. The problem that I would have liked to have seen done a slightly different way, there's actually two buttons here, and you know, I don't know if we're going to be able to get into to actually see that, but there's two buttons on top of these boards. One on its own changes between NTSC and PAL, and the other one does the channel and band. So, you know, long press to switch the band, short press to change the channel. It does remember the channel that it was last on with a power cycle. Now, while that's good and we'd expect that as standard, the one thing it doesn't retain is the power setting, because this has two power settings. Now, this model is able to run 25 milliwatts and 100 milliwatts, and you select that by holding down both buttons at the same time for about 2 seconds, and you'll see both blue lights come on the back of the camera board, and it will be in 100 milliwatt mode. It doesn't retain that. When you power it off, power it back on, you do the cycle, it will default back to 25 milliwatts. That said, the video you'll see at the end, I was using my Diversity AMWay goggles, the DVR built into that, to record the reception on this, and I was flying around. You know, the trees are thick with leaves in summertime in the UK here, and this had no problem at all on 25 milliwatts. You'll see some break up, which you'd expect at 25 milliwatts, but it was very, very respectable. You know, for how far I'm going to be flying this kind of thing away, as I always say, never fly further than you're prepared to walk and go get it. But for the distances that I sort of fly and keep this, I think the 25 milliwatt is absolutely fine. But yeah, that is one little thing to bear in mind. The flight controller itself is based on the Omnibus F3. Has absolutely no problem at all running 8K. Well, I'm running it 8K, 4K. With D-Shot 600 from these little ESCs, which little 4-in-1 ESC unit down here has no problems doing that. And the bit that I love the most, it's got the base flight OSD built in. You know, rejoice. Once you've got this thing set up, all your PID tuning you do via the Betaflight OSD, and you don't have to lift your goggles up at all. You can land, adjust the PID, take off. It's really, really a fantastic thing, and to see it all working wonderfully on this tiny little micro is just yeah, a moment of deep joy. So yeah, massive thumbs up for all of that. I'm actually a real fan of this frame design as well. It's nicely thought out, it's very strong in terms of you know, the structural make of this. You can see these two side plates, how they kind of slot into the lower plate, and you've got some braces on the lower plate. Normally this would make the battery a bit of a pain to mount with these two standoffs and sort of lower section down here, but they do include a bit of foam to raise the Velcro, which is, you know, they've really thought about everything to make this all fit up nicely. Now onto the motors and props. So these motors are 1104 6,000 kV, and you know, just feeling them, they got nice strong what looks to me like arc magnets. The performance out of these are brilliant. I think they're really well matched, and you know, people might say, oh well, you know, why not 7,000 kV, why not 10,000 kV, there are, you know, bigger and stronger available. It's about matching it for its weight. It's about getting the power to weight right, and making sure that you've got the torque. You start going crazy with the KVs, your battery will sag, you'll go to recovery throttle from a big dive or something, and you just won't have the power there to bail from it. You know, the battery will sag with super high KV motors, everything will get hot, it just won't work. You have to match these things properly, and these 6,000 kV 1104s are just a perfect match for this quadcopter in this size. So far I've been really pleased with the performance. Again, you'll see in the video at the end in terms of how it does with recovery. I can go into a loop, a power loop, come out, jam the throttle back in, even with this 40-degree tilt, and it recovers perfectly, straight into another one. You know, it's doing great. And I'm just using the included Eachine battery, the one that came with it, which is a 3S 550 milliamp 40C. So I have ordered some, you know, some proper batteries, some like 70C to try out that are 550, so I can see really the potential of this quad, and also some different props. I've had some recommendations to try the Gem Fan 2-inch, so they're ever so slightly bigger props, quad blades, and I've heard they're very good. So I'm going to try a set of those out and these new batteries. But you know, the performance of this, I even think this performed better than my other favourite micro, which is my 3-inch, and you guys will have probably seen a few videos of this. I mean, look at the battery that I run this guy on. Let's grab that. That's the 4-cell Tattoo 850. If you look at the battery differences, you know, it's pretty mad. But yeah, look at the size difference. This thing is clearly a fair bit smaller, and I prefer this for acro. This thing is it's just got the power to weight ratio is good. It's 3S, this is 4S, but you know, and this is all well matched, but I have to say the power to weight is better on this. So the recovery, punch out, everything is just much nicer when it comes to acro and freestyle. And when you jam the throttle, this thing absolutely disappears. It really does. This is no slouch. I know this is perhaps slightly heavier than some of the, I think it's the is it the Q-Fun 95, or there's another similar model that I know a few people have compared it to that have come in even lighter. But there's a whole flying style that you have to adopt when it comes down to these tiny quads, when they don't carry any inertia. So when you're doing flips, especially, you can be absolutely jamming it along at some crazy speed. You do a flip, and you know, this used to happen a lot, especially with this one. You used to do exactly that, and you'd almost come to a complete stop and not have any momentum to keep going out of a quick flip. Whereas this guy, it just seems to carry itself more like its bigger brothers, more like the 4s and the 5-inch quadcopters, which is again just a great thing. But one of those things that will really help is running a nice high up tilt, so that when you come out level in your camera from doing a fast flip, you are still at an angle where, as you bring the throttle back in, you're still going to accelerate at a nice fast rate. So yeah, it's rare that I will sit here and say there is just so many great things about one little micro. You can decide whether it was more accident or by virtue of design. Personally, I think that this just feels like there's been a lot of thought that's gone into sort of all aspects of this. So, you know, kudos, hats off to Eachine for what they've done here. So it really does get an enormous thumbs up from me. So we will revisit this little guy. I will be trying out those props and the higher C-rated batteries to see what else we can do with it. I shall pop a screenshot of my PIDs where I ended up. I did go into CLI and change the D-term low pass type to PT1, and I removed notch filter 1. These motors will get hot because they're tiny, and all these tiny micro motors get hot. I mean, there's just no way around it. They're doing incredibly high kVs, and they're going to get warm. So it's a little tricky to decide what is too warm. I mean, they shouldn't burn your fingers, but they will be hot no matter what you do with the tuning. So don't be scared if you come down and it's like, well, these are a little warm. That is kind of normal on these. Really, the best thing to do is use your ear more than anything. You know, listen out for oscillation. Can be tricky to tell with oscillations, telling the difference between P-term and D-term oscillation with your ear, because something this small flutters so fast you're not really able to tell which of those incredibly high speed flutters is D or P, but you really have to push the numbers around until you find that sweet spot. But I'm really happy the way this is flying. Again, you'll see in the video footage, so I'll leave a screenshot up for this. The only other thing I'm concerned about, which I will just quickly touch on, the other problem with these micro motors, can you see in there just how absolutely minuscule these bearings are? Tiny bearings doing incredibly high kVs. They're not going to have an awful big number of balls in the races of these either. So I think if anything's going to wear out, it will be the bearings in these. I think those will wear out quicker than anything, especially compared to a larger motor. But time will tell. I'll report back on this. But these are hard to get hold of, I'm afraid, at the minute. Everyone has kind of gone mad for it. But you could build one up by components and just order the frame. But if you are on the fence about getting one of these, as far as my experience with the Lizard 95, it's just a huge thumbs up, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this little guy. It is an enormous amount of fun and so quiet as well. So yeah, if they ever do bring in these drone laws of you know, quads under 250 grams, do you know what? I don't think I'd care as much. This actually, let's check this. I know we're probably around 100 grams. Let's just chuck it on the scales and see what we're up to. 100 grams combined, that is, I think, on its own. So we're at 68 grams for the quadcopter, and then with the battery 114 grams. So there you go, there's your all up flying weight. So yeah, there we go. Let's leave you with some flight footage. You can see me really punishing this to see what performance I can get out of it in terms of the acro freestyle stuff. But I'll tell you now, I had a big smile on my face at the end. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Any questions, leave them in the comments as always, and I'll see you in the next one.